great games at your table. I'm Jonathan Albin, and this is NycosRPG. Welcome. Today we are here in the Game Master's Toolbox, and we're going to be talking about something that is hypercritical to a high fantasy setting, and that is the very methodical and mystical mechanics of magic. We're going to talk about creating new spells. We're going to create how to deal with magical effects, and how we can actually bring more mystery and magic to the game without breaking the bank or driving ourselves insane. Before you do that, make sure you click all the buttons down below and let the algorithm know that you're part of our audience, and let's go.
Absorbing damage is the name of the game. From the claws of monsters or the heat from a ball of flame, or strength in numbers is a roll of the dice.
Alrighty, welcome. So we are going to be embarking in a session that I laughingly call Magicles 101. You'll notice that I've got it spelled a little bit differently, and we're going to go into all the mechanics of it. But one of the biggest fundamentals of role-playing games, especially high fantasy ones, is the development of the series or collection or school of magic that the players embark on when they are in their fantasy setting. And as most games set up a progress from what little is known and grows into the much larger field of what magic can be, this subject is pretty important to players, whether they are magic users, whether they are clerics, whether they are, whatever their class background. So today we're going to be talking about it a little bit differently. We are going to discuss the actual mechanics of what magic essentially is, how it can be interacted with, and how it can be manifested, because when we have a clear understanding of how magic works, it makes the system flow better and allows the players to really get their licks in without spending a huge amount of time doing moment by moment research. So, in the world of Nycos, magic is everywhere. The rules of a storyteller fundamentally say they're the ones who define how magic works within the framework. And for most game masters, it's really kind of a difficult challenge. They have to fundamentally memorize all of the spells that the players might be able to play to understand how they all work and how to describe them. But it also generally means you have to have a really solid grip on how magic itself works. So in the world of Nycos, magic is everywhere. I used the seemingly incorrect spelling of Magicles, Magicles, because in the world of Nycos, at least, magic is itself a form of energy or a particle. In other words, at the smallest component level, magics are literally everywhere, and they are active energy particles looking for utilization. Anything that can interact with them, you would say, do interact with them. Therefore, since magic is pervasive and it is everywhere, how do we interact with it? Now, historically, systems like Dungeons and Dragons clarify that the individual student of magic, at least initially with the wizard, is a studious person who's collecting specific actions and rituals and triggers that activate the magics of the area and are clearly defined by the names of specific spells, which means that in any given wizard's book you would find these basic spells plus a bunch of additional magical effects. In the world of Nycos, we don't look at it from that standpoint at all. As a matter of fact, magic is itself as unique as the caster, and we don't even utilize that term. Those who cause such effects may themselves be magi, but that only refers to those who actually utilize that skill. It does not necessarily associate that one must be a magi in order to activate triggered effects, which means that literally anybody can have magic triggers, have magic effects that they can accomplish regardless of their background. Furthermore, in the world of Nycos, magic is manifest. That is to say, if it is completely underutilized and it is completely not being actively acted upon, it does become visible. You can actually see magic. And this is one of the essentials that really has sort of played havoc with people coming from a role-playing background, but not a I am only coming from a Dungeons and Dragons background, because the world is so much larger. There's so many more pieces in play in the world of Nycos than it would be normally. In the mechanisms of play, it's made relatively simple, but this manifest magic, therefore, has a size, a shape, a dimension, and is in itself interpreted by the style of magic that you are endeavoring to accomplish. So how does one accomplish magic? Well, there are a bunch of different styles of magical use in the world of Nycos, and each of them has a different set of mechanisms by which the magics are affected. And it really is a matter of the player's decision which of them they would prefer to learn or how they want to develop it. These go from the most fundamental brute force tactics of enforcing the magics to do their thing, or highly stylized appeals to the magics to request that they do so. Even to the point of, yes, you can study the mechanics of how an effect might work and utilize the proper style and type of magical energy to accomplish it. This process is really, I can't make it any simpler than this. You as a spellcaster choose which way you wish to do magic, and we make the magic work in that way. The concept of right, ritual, duty, obligation, and discipline, knowledge, it's all up to you as a player. Do you want the magics to act instantaneously, or do you wish for them to have to be cajoled? Do you want to have your interaction with magic be an iron will and sheer discipline, or do you want it to be a fling your hand and magics fly out? It's your choices. And what's interesting is that despite all of these different interpretations that we can place on it, the actual in-game rules for all of them is fundamentally the same, with nuances. Bear with me here. The idea, therefore, is that we are going to be choosing for you your own magics. Now, this may seem problematic because you're so used to having a checklist of spells that you want to learn, and you pick those spells accordingly, and then you trigger those spells appropriately, and then you just tick them off and get them back tomorrow. In this case, magics are literally at your beck and call. Every magi, every person who is affecting a magical effect, does so by one of these methods, and the discipline or direction that you as the player put on the magics is really the key to how they're going to work for you. I have absolute confidence that it would take less than a minute and a half for you to pick one. But for the most part, we're going to be talking about the scholarly pursuit style of Magic, only because that is the most common way in which Magic interacts throughout the history of Dungeons and Dragons. So we're going to be using this very same mechanism, if you will, this scholarly pursuit to learn various magics in this narrow description. And if you want to have a specific video on any particular one or many of these, put a comment down below. I'd be glad to go into each one of them in detail if you so desired. Okay, so the mechanic of Magic in the world of Nycos is that you have a player-defined intent, but you have game master-defined results. What this fundamentally means is that you as a player would choose something you wish to have accomplished through Magic, whether you use a named description for it because you've worked it out, or whether you just simply describe what you want to have accomplished. And then the game master will determine the outcome of that magical effect. Now, there are rules in the development of those, and the very concept of a character's advancement within the game does demand that if you are going to have a Magi effect, you have at least taken a skill in Magicles 101, which is the understanding of how to properly care and feed for the Magicles themselves and how to interact with them. The difficulty, the challenge in the game is to define within parameters what those effects might look like. And because the world itself is rather magical in nature, it's a short road, not a long road, to develop what these are. And the players actually will be integrating into the story that which they want from it. And because NycosRPG and tabletop role-play games in the theater of the mind environment are all based on narration and discussion, then it's simply a matter of a conversation. The player states what they would like to have attempt and what would like to see as a result, and then the game master defines the game mechanics in a way that allows the players to make that interaction. So Magic falls into a scale that we use to determine how big an effect is. The term is Spectricaloton, and it refers to the 5 statuses of the amount of magic. A speck is a tiny bit, a couple of grains of sand equivalent. A trick is a bigger, perhaps a spoonful, like a spoonful of sugar kind of concept. A call of magic is about what you can hold in both of your hands together. A lot is as much as you can put in a wheelbarrow, and a ton is that which you could put into a wagon. That's in terms of the manifestation of the physical magics. Now, magicals. If in the case of a magical effect, you're drawing upon the intangible magics of an area, then the speck would be a small space and a ton would be an entire, room or even larger. And the idea is that the utilization of magic does have a cost-weight ratio, and Spectricaloton is that cost-weight ratio. If you are wanting to light a candle, spec. If you're wanting to light a campfire, trick. If you want to light a forest fire, a ton. It's all a matter of what your perspective is and how you and your game master coordinate. Now, one of the biggest challenges, and perhaps it's because of my being influenced by so many fiction novelists in my youth, the concept of a wizard's spell list is truly unique. The player defines for themselves how their magics are tracked, kept, maintained. In the case of a will and word, it isn't. It's just a simple catalog of all of the terms that you've learned and what they all mean and how you use them. If you're looking at it from the standpoint of a ritual or a ceremonial, then there are large books that describe how those rituals might be accomplished in the standard sense. Again, going back to where we were talking about in the scholarly pathway, then the magical effect is literally written out and described so that the players know that when they do this effect, it's going to have this result. And the scale only determines the intensity or the damage dealing, perhaps, or the physical intensity of the magical effect. The next thing we have to talk about is the concepts of permanency or spell effect duration. Because the players are being able to build their own effects, they have to take into account whether this is something that's going to change the world permanently or if it is something that simply is a matter of convenience. And in order to make magic make sense, we have to really get a solid hold on what the player's intention is, because the creation of something, if depending on the size of the item and the gravitas of such an item, will greatly affect the cost and the long-term outcome. The idea in the Mickey Mouse story of the Sorcerer's Apprentice, the ability to cause something to do work itself creates a permanent thing now that will do that work, and not being able to focus on how long it's being controlled, and you're not worrying about concentrating on controlling it, and it's just simply doing its own thing, does itself create multiple challenges. I'm reminded of a situation where a player had built a helper for themselves for a specific moment, and when the moment was over, the worker simply wanted to do more work, and so would constantly be bugging the spellcaster for something else to do. What do I do now? What do I do now? What do I do now? And so on. And the gravitas of utilizing magic itself is a lesson. And so because the mechanism of NycosRPG is continuous advancement, players have a real opportunity to consider right at their creation moment whether something is built to be long time and permanent, or whether it is simply a fiction of their imagination. And with an understanding of how long an effect lasts, being associated again with Spectricaloton, if you wanted something to last permanently that you were going to focus on all the time, it's going to be very costly because it takes a lot of energy to keep going. Whereas if you simply are creating or manifesting a physical object with certain characteristics, they could literally be scattering the ground. So in the area of the world of Nycos, therefore, literally any possible magics might be found, and so it makes for some interesting challenges, shall we say. Now, utilizing the term form follows function really is referring to the fact that a spellcaster, a magi, if you will, when they are affecting a trigger, they are going to be describing what's going to happen, how it's going to happen, and when it's going to happen. And it causes the players to have to take very seriously what they say in game. So there is a nuance between having fun and throwing out phrases and saying you're going to do thus and such, but that's a far cry from the actual administration of a magical effect. And the less you say, arguably, the shorter the effect. The idea, therefore, is that the players have to determine how they want to accomplish it. And that doesn't mean it isn't going to be fantastic and mystical and wondrous. Some simple things make perfect sense and therefore are easy to manifest. Other times the process is burdensome and takes a long time, and it's really about what the players put into the game for their own effect, fundamentally because they are the ones who are creating that effect by manipulating the magicals. So, as you may know, NycosRPG does include a consistent and constant advancement process. So that means that as a character progresses through the story, their handle on the magics around them becomes more solid, more secure, follows their whims to a greater degree. What this does in effect is allows the player's agency to actually guide the manipulation of magics. There's nothing like the moment when a player decides to call an effect their own, put their name on it, and suddenly it's Modine's magical muffins and not just a batch of sleep-inducing foodstuffs. They've actually defined it for themselves. And the more they focus on making it their own and developing its advancement, the more agency they have, the more detail they can put in it, and the more that's understood by everyone involved in the play process, because the explanations become fundamentally hardwired for the group in basis of that particular character. How do dice rolls affect the effects, you ask? Well, the concept of a quantum die roll mechanism, which D&D utilizes, D&D does not utilize, but NycosRPG does, provides the answer. As you see here on this sheet, you have potentially 6 different responses from a die roll as compared to the traditional succeed-fail break line that you have in most other role-play games. The idea here is that the outcome is going to be altered, if you will, by the farther distances you are from success. An abject perfect success gets you exactly what you were looking for in exactly the right manner, and a wild success is a slightly less advantageous position, but everything has gone extremely well. A success is you've accomplished what you were looking to accomplish only. Partial success is, well, it worked, but it didn't work the way you wanted it to. And then finally, failure and catastrophe. And the die roll does affect the outcome, but it acts more as a filter for that. So the more proficient you become, the higher in the progression path you become, the less likely any failure or catastrophe becomes. It's still an eventuality, and it still will affect the outcome. But as a player becomes more accomplished, becomes more of their purview than of the game masters. All right, so then we talk about the magical aftermath. A character who has done a magical effect and it's triggered off and it's done its thing, the magics by nature are converted. One of the fundamental rules of Magicles 101 is that magicals are never created nor destroyed, only altered. And so therefore the magical aftermath generally is a byproduct standpoint where what you've done will be manifest and left in such a fashion that people will see. For example, if you were utilizing discipline and control magics, that manifests as a reddish afterglow or a reddish powder, and therefore it becomes evident when someone has done magics of that nature because there are signs. The reason why this is important is that the story has to continue. You have to move on into the next event and the next, and you need to have a marker within the mechanism that allows the players to develop clues about what might have happened. Now, there's all kinds of inspection skills and magics that allow you to manipulate the evidence, but the point here is that your effect affects the world forever. The outcome of your effect, the larger and more grandiose it is, the more expressive and permanent the result is. What this allows for, therefore, is a game master to get out of the way of the players and let the players really build their magical repertoire in the way they want to create the image and the outcome that they want within this system. I hope this has helped. It may not have. Maybe it has created more questions than it has answers. If so, post the questions below and I'll be glad to answer them. We do have an Ask Me Anything coming up probably this weekend. Let's see. Yeah, it'll be on the 24th, and that will be here on the Twitch channel. So watch for that. I'm going to be preloading a bunch of questions. If you have any particular ones you'd like to ask, feel free to post them, and I will do what I can to include those in that conversation. I hope to see you when we get back to that. I'm Jonathan Albin. This is NycosRPG, and thank you for visiting the Game Master.